Mhm.
For sure by tomorrow is what I think.
Okay, fine. What about you, Asta?
So JavaScript, actually, I went through what you have shared, so I'm
Mhm.
good with that. I didn't get a chance to go through HTML, CSS part, so that I'll do today.
Okay. And what about SVG? Have you tried some few
Yeah.
examples?
No, so that is also pending.
Okay. And Ganesh, you, SVG?
SVG I've done sort of because I already have a knowledge on SVG, so not many doubts on it. I might be having doubts on JavaScript only.
Okay, okay. Sure. And what about you, Rupali?
So as far as I don't have any doubts in JavaScript and HTML, for SVG, I have not started to look into it yet. So I'll start
Mhm.
today and probably tomorrow or in next class I'll ask some doubts for
Okay.
SVG.
Okay, cool. Makes sense. Okay, so let me share my screen. So you guys can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so far we have covered JavaScript for D3, we have covered HTML5 and CSS3 for D3, and today we are going to look into D3JS fundamentals, and in the next class we'll look into scale and basic shapes, and also we will look into the the chart fundamentals which you need to know. So these two will combine together, we'll put it in this session, and network visualization interactivity will put it here, and then we'll have a bandwidth in this session itself for to take an example for the stock exchange and build some graph, and then the remaining two session we will just look into uh, practical examples. So we will see examples from the official documentation and some examples on financial aspects. So what kind of graph you need to build and how you can bring interactivity and some core concepts and advanced concepts of D3JS there. So before starting, I think you all are familiar with D3JS. So we'll have a small quiz, and before starting fundamentals, which will be on very core fundamental of D3JS. So let's start with Rupali. Yeah, so this is the first question. Which of the following is the correct way to insert a div inside the body tag using D3 selection? So what do you think? Which one is the right answer?
Correct way, right? To
Yes.
this.
So there are four options.
I think first,
Yeah.
because we are selecting first body tag and then appending a div,
Yeah. Yeah.
and B and C doesn't work. I mean, it will
Yes.
for C it will.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it will be. It will be appending text div as a text maybe,
Yeah. So
and dot append div won't. We are not specifying here to which part of
yes.
DOM we are selecting. So maybe first one.
Perfect. So this is the right explanation. Let's go with Asta for the second one. So you can suppose we have three p tag inside the body tag, and we have loaded inside an example we have a d3js, and we have three p tag. And what will happen if we run the following command? So we're selecting p tag, and we are changing the style color to the red. So what do you think? What should be the answer? Whether it is A, B, or C? Asta, can you see the screen?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I can.
Okay. So what do you think? What would be the right answer?
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe A.
Okay.
No,
So
sorry. B. Like only the first P tag will be executed. Like the color of only the first P tag will be changed.
yes, yes, yes. Yeah, correct. So the color will change for the p tag. So when we do select, right, it always does the first one. If we do select all, then it does all the p tags. Okay, so the next is Ganesh.
Yes.
So the following code will return an empty selection if the p tag is not present. Is it true or false?
Following code will return an empty selection. That's true, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a pretty simple one.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you can take the next fourth one as well. Which of the following is
Yeah.
not a function used in DOM manipulation?
One sec. I was just getting another call. Which of the following is not a function used in DOM manipulation? Mm, remove B option B.
Okay, anybody else? Rupali? So,
Um, Probably delete.
yeah, so answer is delete. So you can do remove, and this is remove, attribute, append, and text. These are like JavaScript functions to manipulate DOM. Okay, and D3JS, and this is not JavaScript, but you can say it's yeah, it's a JavaScript as well as like in jQuery combining. So text is a jQuery method. Perfect. So next
Saurabh,
is,
what will option C do?
so it's at the attributes. So, so let's say the class, right? Class is also the attribute. So when you create a DOM element at runtime, and you want to give the class name, right? So with that you can manipulate. So this is like one of the way. Another thing is like you can set the data attributes. So you have an HTML element and you want to give some data value to it, you can do with the attribute. So attribute of an HTML element or a DOM element. So to set the attributes or specify the property, and you can say that property as well as the value to any HTML DOM element, we use at attr method. Okay, so maybe the next question for Astha. Method chaining is the technique used in D3JS when we connect different method with a period. Is it true or false?
True.
Yeah, it's a very simple one. Okay, then next one for Ganesh. Which of the following function is used to connect a single data element with the selected DOM element?
Which is the following function used to connect a single data element? Uh-huh. Is it data? Data.
Okay, and so what is the use of data?
Saurav, if you don't mind, can I just I mean, someone is calling me
Yeah, yeah, sure,
constantly, so
sure, no problem, no problem. You can just mute. Yeah, maybe Rupali, you can tell the answer.
Data maybe.
Okay, Astha.
Yeah, data. I'm not sure about this.
Okay, so it's a datum. So answer is B. So data is used when you pass an array of elements, and datum is used when you pass a single data value. So
What if I use data with only single
you
element array?
yeah, so you need to pass in an array. You cannot pass a single value.
Okay.
Yeah. And can anybody tell me what's the use of entry?
No idea, sir.
Okay, so I think this is something we will cover in this session. The last one, which method is used when the number of DOM element is less than the number of element in the data array? Let's go with Rupali. Okay, So this is also something new, I think, for you. You have a,
Yeah.
okay. So the answer is entry here. So yeah. So let's start. Oh, let's wait for 2 minutes for Ganesh.
Saurabh, I'm joining.
Okay. Yeah, so we have covered the quiz. The one thing I came to know, like, you are not aware about datum and you are not aware about entry. So this is something we will cover in this session, and also we'll cover manipulation of DOM elements. We'll see a few examples, and we will also see some method chaining and data binding, and then we will look into few examples. Like, very we'll start with very basics one, and then few use case of SVG as well. So let's start with the first one. Let me open my inspect element so we can play around. So this is a very basic example. So there is a selection in D3JS, which is the main concept, which is the first concept in D3JS. So what it does is select like n number of any number of DOM element. So there are two type of method. One is select, another select all. Select is used to select single element, and select all is used to select multiple element. So when you're operating on some DOM elements collectively, you go with select all, and when you're operating on individual elements, you go with select. So, and this is the method chaining. So you can see D3JS has a method select, right? Okay. So let's see. So if you see, this is the D3JS library. I have imported through HTTPS, but I have in the local as well. So sometimes it's good for you to understand. Just a minute.
Saurabh, this
Yeah,
is me.
yeah, Ganesh.
We are recording this class, right?
What happened? I didn't get you. Can you please repeat?
We are recording this class, right?
Yes, 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 yes. I'm already recording. Yeah. So have you, like, anyone before explore the D3JS library in terms like the code base of D3JS after learning JavaScript?
No.
Okay. So so it's always good, like, when you're learning any new library, and just see that, because you are now familiar with JavaScript, you can understand a bit of JavaScript code, right? So whenever you get time, just explore few methods, right? It's not necessarily you need to know everything, but yeah, just see like how to write the professional JavaScript code. And if you see this, you can see like we have a selection. We have created this as a function, right? And we have extending this prototype, and these are the methods we are attaching to it, like data, enter, exit, order, call, right? And this is a function based object which has two attributes, groups and parents. So so if you see, right, it's not really hard to understand the complex JavaScript code. If you like try to see core functions of D3JS, it's written in very plain JavaScript. Like initially, like when you look, like, it seems to be really hard, because might be you're not familiar with syntax like type of, right? You might be not familiar with how this new will work, whether this creates a function object. But try to get yourself familiar with how the library code has been built. So when you write your bigger code bases, especially in JavaScript, you can try to follow the convention, and you can see like how the production code, how the library's code has been built. So yeah, so we're talking about select, right? So what select does, so we have, so can anybody tell me, like, if I just console d3.select div, what will be the output? So if I just console here, let's say
H.
h, okay, so we are selecting div and we're consoling s. Okay, so why h?
No, no, I didn't. Actually, you made a change, right? I didn't see that.
Okay, so now what I did, I just select the div and we're just consoling it. So what will be the output? Okay. So what do you mean by the selection, not the text? Is it what do you say that, like, in terms of programming?
I mean, where the text is placed, that small space. I mean,
Mm,
Saurav, sorry, I didn't get your question, Saurav.
okay, so my question is, if we just, so previously you can see the example was this. We are selecting the div, and then we are actually getting the text, and there we are printing it. So I was asking, like, let's say if I remove this text, so can you tell me what will be the output?
It will print that statement as it is, like whatever is assigned to S, that part will be printed.
So you mean like d3 dot select div?
Yeah,
Okay.
and it won't go to the div part. It will directly print that.
Okay. So what about you, Rupali? What do you think?
I'm sorry, I was lost for a moment and I rejoined the call.
Okay, no problem. So you understood, right? The we was previously we were seeing an example of this, which is where we are selecting a div and getting the text. Now we, if we have this as the code, we're just selecting a div and we are just printing it. We're consoling the output. So what will be the S will get printed? So Asta has said like it will directly take it as a string and print. What do you think?
I don't think so. It will be a string.
Okay. So what should be?
It will be blank and that particular section only.
Yeah, it will not print anything, Saurav.
Okay. Let's see what it does. So you can see we have this as output. So we have group parents and we have a object, right? So that object is a kind of a string and it has a lot of methods. So when I showed you the select method, right, like this one, so what it does, so you can see here, it creates a selection function object, right? So it returns a selection, it return a selection object. So d3 is, so when you, so when we were learning method chaining, right, so what happened in method chaining, so d3 is like it's a module, right? You're trying to access a select function object, it's kind of another module you're calling with d3. So when you call the select, right, this is a method on d3. So when you call this select, it returns a selection object. And what the selection object has, so based on the content, so it, you can see that's a selector string. If it is string, then we try to create the selection object, or you can selection function object. So that's why these many functions or methods are attached to it, so you can manipulate that string. So if you see the text one, right, you can see here, this is the text method. So selection text will get called when you say the text method, the selection text method will call, and it check if you're passing an error. So this is like more JavaScript code. So text content is a JavaScript method. So it takes the node. So what is this node? This is a DOM node, or you can say a select node, and it returns the content to it. So do you understand this, like how internally like this call goes? Because now you're familiar with JavaScript, right? So most
Yes.
importantly, like you need to know how like how you invoke library and how you're using and how it's working. So there is, it's not really hard to build even d3.js, right? So if you see, uh, it's a very standard way, because we are manipulating like we are manipulating DOM, right, with the with some methods. So we have created a select method, which is our own custom method, which is called on a function object called d3. And what we pass a node to it. So that node is HTML node. So if you are not calling a function, right? So if you see this text, right, if we do this, then on select node, this text method will be get called. So that's how the chaining works, and that's how you need to understand like how like we pass output of one function or one method to another method. So this is a really simple one example. So whenever you are debugging or working on any JavaScript code, try to print the output of a part of it and see like what will be the console output, and then based on that you can analyze what are the different methods attached to it. So any library you build, when you write some custom methods, right, you try to use some prototypes. So what prototype does, which you already know, it extend the behavior or add methods to the existing function object. So now you can understand like how select work in D3.js, and what's the role of like how the entire flow works under the hood. Do you have
So
any?
sorry.
Yeah, Rupali.
Yeah, I have one question. So for D3 dot select div,
Mm-hmm.
whole div will be returned, right?
So
Whatever,
yeah, it's not div,
whatever.
yeah, so it's not a div, so it's a selection object. So if so we are so the div is a part of it.
Right.
So if you have, let's say you have a div, and inside div you have a p tag, right? So the entire div node, the DOM node, will be a part of it, and it has some attributes and methods, let's say group, parents, and there are some individual prototype methods which is attached to it. So if you have to say like what it will return the select node, or maybe selection node. That should be the right answer. And in that node, so that node is an object, right? So if you see here in the select method, we return with the new, right? So this is an object, or in more precise term, you will say it's a function object, because there is no such object in JavaScript. Everything is function object. So we try to simulate the behavior of object-oriented programming. Okay, so now everybody is clear, right? How select works and how we invoke method chaining inside.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So let's see the second example. So again, here we have a select all div. So we have multiple divs, and then we do have a style. We are setting the color as green. So let's see this example. So you can see the output is color. It just color code all the text of all the divs. Now this is also very similar to how select works, but instead of applying to one element, it will apply to all the elements. So if you can see here, select all, so it does the very same thing what it does here. So instead of applying on one, it apply on all the elements. So next. Okay, so sometime you want to add or maybe you can say most of the time you want to add dynamic text. So when you draw your bar graph based on the data, you want to add your tooltips, right? So given an example here, it's a very basic one. So we have an empty, if you see here, we have no data inside div. So we just select the div and we add the text. So here we are passing the input, right? So when we, so there are two things in text. You can fetch the data if you don't pass any arguments. So if you have seen the method in D3.js here, let me show you the example. So you can see the select and we have text. So inside the selection text method, if we have length, then we do this. That means if any argument we are passing, then we does this, otherwise we return the text content. So in this example, we are passing an argument. So argument length is not 0. So what we does, we actually iterate through all the elements and we try to apply this method. Okay. So ultimately, like so all the method which you use in D3.js, it's very similar. Like in terms of manipulating the DOM, it's very similar to jQuery methods or JavaScript methods. So there is no such custom methods in D3.js for manipulating DOM. Another example, we have a div and we want to append a div with a text content. So this is an example of method chaining. Again, we select the body and then we select div and then we append the text, right? So if we just see the output, so we had the one div initially, we append the div with the content. This is an example of manipulation of DOM. Another example, can you tell me what will be the output for this? So you have two divs, we are selecting div and removing it. Ganesh, can you tell me the output?
So remove. I think it will remove the first div tag, right?
Yes. So the output will be second div tag. So if we just print, you can see second div tag. So always the select method will look up. So how it will look up into the DOM? It start from the root node and then look for the child elements. So whatever it find the first, it actually start applying those methods on the first one. Perfect. Next one. So this is we have a div, we have some text, so we are selecting the div, we are styling it. So this is when you want to continuously style. So so one thing is not good in D3.js when you want to style with multiple attributes. So either you can do in CSS. So okay, if you just see this example, right? Let's say we have a div text and we are coloring with blue and font size we're setting as 30. Let's say what so let's assume like we have, like, say more than 100 attributes or maybe 100 properties to set, or not 100, let's say 10 to 15 properties to set for any HTML element using D3.js. So what should be the preferred way? Can anybody tell me, like, will this be the preferred way?
No, creating a separate CSS file and then coloring it or styling it.
So you mean, yeah, creating a class and
Yeah.
append.
Yes, and then applying it.
So how do you think like you can apply to div element? Let's say you have created a class and you have set the properties, the key value pair for each and every attributes. How you will add to this div, that styling?
We will open a div tag
Mhm.
and then mention class and that particular class name, and whatever CSS we have applied in that class will be applied to the div tag.
Okay, so you mean you're saying like you will do that in the body tag, right? Like inside
Yeah.
div you will give the class name.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, let's assume you have class as dynamic, right? You don't know what should be the class name. So how you will do that? If you have to do it with the runtime, like with the help of D3.js.
Maybe mentioning that particular class with this select statement.
Okay, so select will just select, it doesn't apply any method. Do you think like any other method you can apply? So like as we have text and style.
Append.
Like text
Append.
and all.
Okay, append will append DOM nodes. It doesn't append
There is
class.
there is nothing something like
So
append style or something like that.
okay, so you have something called attribute, ATTR. We discussed it,
Yes.
right? So you can
Right,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Correct.
so you can set with that ATTR method. So you can always look up into D3.js and so if you see you have, I think there are a lot of ATTR function, but if you search, right, you will get to know, you will find, yeah, I think there was a previous one, selection attribute, yeah. So this method will be mapped to ATTR, right? So this does the class things. So actually, if you see attr internally, there is a method, JavaScript method, which is get attributes. So when you're working on D3JS, you can always look up into the D3JS library, like what exact code does it use in JavaScript to manipulate the DOM, or maybe like whatever you are trying to do, right? So it's good to know. So there is no attr function in general in JavaScript, but that attr is a method in D3JS. But internally there's a get attribute, which is uh, JavaScript method. So it's good to know. Okay, so next one. Okay, so this is an example where we have an error class. So you can see, you can set the attr, you can use attr method, set the class as error. So the color will be set at the runtime. So if you open this, you can set the color of it. So attr is a very like mostly used element in D3JS for setting up styling, or maybe setting up data attributes. So you need to know attr really well. Next one. So you select the body. I think this is the method chaining example we already covered. So let's see the further one. Okay, what should be the output of this? Can anybody tell me? So you have a p tag, and inside JavaScript code you select the body, then you select the p, then you use datum with a value 10, and then you apply a callback, which is like you're setting the data which is you are passing in an array. You return the data. So what should be the output?
10.
10.
Yes. So let's see here. So you can see in DOM we get the 10, right? So this is also one of the basic example. And then they give a method called data. So what should be the output for this?
D should be 10, 20, 30.
This particular
Array, the entire array.
yes.
Okay, so so 10, 20, 30 will be in the same line, or it will be on a new line?
No, 10, then 20, and then 30. It will be like vertical.
Yeah, yeah, so correct. So it will be all vertical with the p tag. Okay, next example.
Saurabh, quick question here.
Yes.
What if we don't apply the text method? I mean the text function, and we just keep it till data 10, 20, 30.
Then so you
It won't return.
no, it won't return because you're not applying. So if you see the text method, right, it takes the function as an argument, right? So sometimes, see why we need
And then
to pass this function. So basically, see, this is the default way of receiving a value and then returning it. But let's say if you want to do some manipulation, like instead of 10, let's say, can you do something like this? Then what will happen? So you can say 100, right? So this is the default custom method to return the data. So let's see, like if you ask, so if you see this select, and then if you see the data, so it has a selection data, so it just return the data, it does nothing. And then it, after that it okay, you are not familiar with bind, right? Okay, but you don't need to be, but I can tell you, like at a higher level what it does. Bind method will help you to bind a method with an array of elements. So whenever you have given a list of values and you want to pass each value of an array to some method or behavior, then you use bind. So you don't need to necessarily know all those things. It will be like very advanced JavaScript, but you need to understand here what this text does. So if you see the text method here, let me show you. I think selection text. Yes. So here you can see that we are actually checking if you're passing the function, then it will take this text function. And there is something called apply. Okay, you are not familiar with apply as well. So this is also like advanced JavaScript. So bind, apply, assign, these are the methods on which we apply on function objects when we want to manipulate an function DOM object, right? So what is happening here is, if you see, okay, this was the example, right? So this method we are passing, what it does, it takes input. So it actually taking 10 as input and returning 10. So if you see here, so this is something, this is actually the usage of our function. So we apply the value, so we are passing the value which is 10, and then we are applying on the argument. So what is our argument? Is a function, so it returns a value, and then we are putting that value inside text content. So basically this is one of the, so if you can ask me like why we need this, right? So this is a kind of a function, right? This is a default function which you can enhance it for your own use case. Let's say you want to build a graph, a horizontal horizontal bar chart. So you have a different width, right, and you have a constant height. So when you want to manipulate the width based on the data, now how you will pass data? The data will come from different sources which you will pass into data method, and then on each data you want to manipulate maybe the width or maybe the height, right? So that's why they have given a default function, so you can use that and leverage, this is the like base case, but you can manipulate this function as per your own case. So if you don't want to return d, so before that you want to do some other calculation, you can do you can write some behavior like here, right? So right now it's a one line method, right? So you can do something like this, right? And here you can write your own custom code, right? And then you can return d. So let's say you want to, so what kind of custom code you think you can write? Maybe let's say validate data, validate data. So let's say you say if maybe if your the value is uh, greater than 20, you return 0, right? So if you see the output, it's something like this. So you can
Right, right.
right, so you can understand, instead of one liner you can see like there are a lot more power which you have with this. So they have given a default one, but you can do, you can write your own method, or let's say own function object which you can invoke inside this to manipulate before actually returning data to your svg or your DOM node or maybe the HTML component. Yeah, so that's how the power of like when you pass function as a parameter in JavaScript. So this is these are the few important concepts in JavaScript which help you to do lot many things compared to like other languages. Yeah, so this is the 10th example. Let's see the 11th one. Okay, what will be the output of this? Can anybody tell me? Any volunteer for this? So we are just selecting body and selecting all the p tag. So we have 3 p tag, we are passing data. So if you see, we have 3 p tag, but the data is more, and then each value we are appending as a text content nodes. So text content node which is inside p tag, and then we have some method called enter, we are appending p, and then again we are doing the same thing. So can you tell me the output of this? Let's start with
It
the,
happened
yeah, Ganesh.
twice, 10, 20, 30, 50, 70, and then 10, 20, 30, 50, 70.
Okay, so you mean like twice this entire array.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you think, Rupali?
I think it will give 10, 20, 30. Then it will append two p tags and will give 50, 70.
And Astha, what do you think?
I think it will print 10, 20, 30, 50, 70 twice.
Okay, so the right answer is Rupali. So that's where the enter method comes into picture. So enter method will help you to let's say whenever the DOM elements are less than the number of required data point, then you use enter. So what enter does, it keep a watch on your data, and based on the data it append, or maybe based on that, like what you are trying to append. If you're appending p elements, it will try to append the required p elements into.
Okay, you mean to say as we have already included three paragraphs or keys,
Yes.
so it will be printing 10, 20, 30, and
Yeah.
then again it will
Yes.
append. Okay.
Yes. So yeah, so Rupali explanation was right. So let me just think about the syntax, right? So you will get the output. So what we are doing here, we're selecting the body and selecting p tag. So you will get three p tag here, right? And then you are trying to map the data with this function parameter. So what it does, it will map 10 to first p tag, 20 to another p tag, 30 to another. Now when it iterates for 50 and 70, right, it doesn't find any p tag nodes, right? So if you see this enter method, what it does, it look up like what is the remaining data we have, and based on that it append the required p tag and then return the data into it. So let's see the output. 10, 20, 30, 50. So let's say if I do, instead of p, let's say if we do h1, so you can see the difference now. So yeah, so this is enter method. Now the question is how you will know like this enter method you need to use. So uh, when you have a DOM and you are not sure the data, let's say data values are going to map with the DOM elements, then you prefer to use enter method, so which will help you to create the consistent, or maybe help you to plot the consistent values with the representation. Okay, so everybody clear with the enter, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So meanwhile you should also try to look up into this method. Go just search inside this library ed3js and see like what the selection enter method does, so you will know. Okay, so you can see in general, you know, like how map worked, but sometimes code might be hard to understand, but you try to get an overview of it. Okay. So yeah, this is also the important concept. The next one, okay, this is with the svg. So we have a svg, we have given a width and height, and there are some circles. So can you tell me what will be the output of this circle? So we are selecting svg, and then we are selecting all the circles, and then we're just trying to print circle.nodes. Okay, let's start with Asta.
Not sure. I'm thinking.
Okay, Ganesh.
Well, yeah, sorry. One second. I'm lost here. So, what were you asking?
So we have this code. What do you think? What will be the output of this console? So we have SVG and few circles in it. We are trying to select the SVG, and then we are trying to like pick up all the. We are trying to select all the circles, and we are printing. We are calling circles.nodes method, which is like a D3JS method. What do you think? What will be the output?
Mm, it will be printing. I mean, it will create a frame and then circles inside.
Create a frame.
Like we have given SVG, right? 400
Yeah,
and
yeah.
800.
Just,
So that
yeah.
would be a
So this will be SVG. So what will the output of this?
Mm-hmm. No. I mean, it might print number of circles.
Okay.
I mean, is that what I'm thinking? I think it will print how
Yeah.
many circles we.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What do you think, Rupali?
I may be wrong, but I think it will print nothing because circle has no.
Okay.
In the circle tag, there is nothing else, right? It is closed only.
Okay. Yeah. So okay. So circle dot notes. Notes is a method which is defined inside D3JS, right? And as we discussed just I think a few minutes back, uh, with an example of svg.select div, which return element of which return a DOM node, right? Or maybe you can say D3JS selection node. And if you see the example here, so what it does, it returns an array of circle object. So so if you see in a circle, this is your circle object, or you can say this is like your HTML, but when you access in your JavaScript, then you have different method to apply on this object. So this is like SVG object. Now what are the different methods you can apply? So you can see there are so many methods you can apply. Like you already know about CX and CY and radius, right? In the previous classes, but you can see like how we access. So whenever you're working with the D3JS, right, you try to console like your partial code and see like what will the output, and also see some other methods. So how, like so far, like is there any one of you have seen the API documentation of D3JS?
Which documentation, Saurabh?
API documentation.
No, Saurabh, I haven't seen it.
Okay. So API documentation, okay, might be like initially it takes some time to understand, but API documentation will help you to give you the good knowledge of any library. So maybe not this lecture, maybe in the next classes we will also parallelly following up with the API documentation of D3JS. So which is like this one. If I show you, let's say D3JS documentation. So this is the one, API documentation. So you can see this one.
Oh, okay. This one we have seen, but I haven't I mean, I haven't gone to it, but then I've seen this.
Yeah. So you need to know, like, so you just get hands-on, do all the methods. So whenever you're working on any graph, you can see the different possibility of implementing different features or functionalities around it. So that's where the API documentation will help. So first, to know like what are the different methods are there. It's not necessarily you need to know all, but you need to know the higher level overview of it. And once you know that, then once you're working on practical example, you will have that mindset to apply these methods and functionalities. So it's always good whenever you work on any technology or any language, any library, just make sure you've been through the official documentation and API documentation really well. This will stand out to you like compared to other candidates, and you will have a very higher level of like higher level as well as an core level knowledge of and any library. We will see this when we work on the next classes. We will follow up with few examples and try to cover as much as possible the D3JS API documentation as well. So we'll see some examples and get hands-on as well. Okay.
So sort of that will
Yeah.
only return the methods of
No, no, no. So it,
associated.
yeah, it return an array of circle object.
Oh,
Okay, and circle, so if you want to say precisely what is this circle object, you will say it returns an array of SVG or circle SVG object. That should be the right answer, right? So yeah, so this is the one. The next one. Okay, now let's exploit some more examples. So you can see you have D3JS loaded and you have some data, and then So what we're trying to do here, we have a body tag, we append a svg, and then we are trying. Okay, so one more question I have, like why svg? Why why D3JS people, they have thought like svg is the right choice?
because we want to enter the shapes.
Okay.
It's a graphics, right? So it will support the vector of graphics. So I think that is where they
Yes, coordinate system maybe.
yeah.
Yes,
So that
yes.
Yeah, so it's a scalar vector graphics, right, with the name itself. And the main advantage of having svg is you can work with css and html, really work well with svgs. So you can manipulate DOM like to any extent. Whatever you can do in JavaScript, you can do with the SVGs as well. So that means like if you have any DOM element, so whatever the methods you can apply on that DOM element, you can do that with the SVG as well. And yeah, so that's the main reason. Okay, so in this example, we are selecting select all, but we don't have nothing. Then have we're passing a data to it, and then we are saying enter. So you can understand the usage of enter here, because the pre we don't have that attributes, or we don't have the DOM nodes mapping with your entire with all the data elements. So that's why we use enter. Then append circle, so we're going to append this svg, and then each circle we are going to add some radius and center, and some center x and center y based on the value. And the style we have given, we are filling all the circles with a dark blue. Let's see the output. So you can say it prints hello world. But basically it just plot all the circle svgs on this on the DOM with the help of data. Right. So this is basic example of or maybe you can say like we have covered the basic fundamentals. Let's see some other examples as well. Okay, let's open this. So now we are trying to use some JavaScript method, or try to apply some events of JavaScript in our SVG objects. So we have a SVG and we have circles. So we have some radius and we have some center x and center y, and we are filled with different colors. So can anybody tell me, by seeing this code, what is the exact functionality we are going to build? Let's start with Astha. Just maybe try to predict like what will happen.
No, yeah, it will be displaying the circles of specified radius, and then like we are trying to uh, pass some text that will be printed when we hover on that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's. What do you think, Ganesh?
even I think the same, Saurabh. So when I hover my mouse over to any circle, so it should be displaying the text.
Okay. So where are we passing the text?
It will highlight the circle on which we will hover it.
Yeah. So
So you're
yes.
saying raise, right? So it might.
Yeah. So raise will retain the property. So if we see this, you can see now, right? So this is so raise will try to retain the properties of the object. So this right is actually a circle object. So let's see. Let's print the console.log for this. So you will get to know what is exactly this. Oh, so I think it's why it's not printing it. Issue pen. What is this? Okay. So I think there is because of this JavaScript fails. Then I don't know why it's not printing, but it should print. Okay. So if I tell you what it happens, so this, you know, right, d3 dot select all circle will return all the circle object, and each circle object we are passing this we are passing to a select method. So we are selecting each circle. So when we select each circle, and then if we say raise, then we are trying to retain the properties of that circle. We are trying to focus that circle alone. So this method does. So yeah, so this is also sometime you can see you will find very commonly to use when you try to build some tooltip. So internally the tooltip will be built using this method. So what it does is it try to overshadow the other elements or other SVG elements around it, so you can focus on the hover element itself. Okay.
Saurabh,
Yep.
why we have used, I mean, why we have declared or imported D3 two times here? I mean, in the script tag.
Yeah, it's not required. I think I copy pasted this code from other file and then I add it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so not necessary. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let me. I don't know like why it's not printing. It should actually print. Console.log. So you can see this is circle is. So you remember right in previous example we were displaying some circle array of circle objects. So it will be the individual circle object. Yeah, you can see. So when we hover, so it returns a circle. So when we go here, it returns this.
Okay.
So it's an individual, so this is a individual circle object, and or maybe you can say the DOM node, and then each DOM node we can apply this method. So this raise method comes from an SVG. Now, or maybe let's see if we have this d3 in this raise. We have, yeah, so we have this method. But this raise is different because I think we need to look up into this library instead of this one, the local one. Okay, so this is like the basic examples. Then let's see some responsiveness. Now you all familiar with JavaScript, so this is the code. So in this code we have, so anybody familiar with Bootstrap? Rupali, do you know Bootstrap?
Bootstrap, I think it is a collection of CSS classes.
Okay. And Asta, have you
Yes,
worked?
so
Bootstrap CSS, we mentioned it sometime
Okay.
in the code.
Okay.
yeah, it's
And
collection of CSS, HTML, and JavaScript libraries.
okay. And what do you think, Ganesh? Are you familiar with
Yeah,
Bootstrap?
I think like same,
Okay.
same.
So Bootstrap is a framework which is built with the help of CSS. It's written in CSS3. So Bootstrap will help you to. So when you are working on a code base, it's very hard for you to achieve uh, what do you say, responsiveness, and as well as the styling. So it comes with a default set of styling and as well as the support for responsiveness. So you can support multiple devices. So you will see like when you work in production code, when you're building some graph, you will prefer to use Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is, let me show you. Okay. So if you see here, you can see the basic examples here. Let me show you some components. Okay, this is okay. Let me not show you this one. Let's show you the basic one. This is really basic.
Sorrow, sorry to disturb.
Yeah,
How long do we have a class? I mean,
maybe.
I'm somewhere outside and my mobile is out of charge, so I'm thinking of dropping the call.
Okay, so maybe like in another next 20 minutes.
Oh,
Yeah, not more than that. Yeah, or maybe lesser than that. So we are almost covered. Okay, I'll just want to go through the responsiveness, and so you understand like how the responsiveness work, because you will be working on a scalable graph. And if your graphs are not scalable in terms of UI, right, if somebody open, let's say, your graph in smaller devices like say iPad, and they cannot see the entire graph, the interactivity will break down, or the responsiveness will break down. So it's good to use Bootstrap. So Bootstrap comes with default classes, let's say container, row. So I can show you the example of it. Let me load this example. See, so if you see inside body tag, so you have a div. So you just see this, we have a div. Now on the right hand side you can see this styling here. So this is the styling which comes with your Bootstrap framework. So you can see there is a default padding, there is a default margin, right? So margin is auto, so that means everything is aligned to the center, and we have given a padding left. So if you see on the left you have a padding, and right also you have a padding, and there is a default set of width. So whenever you are trying to build any graph, it's good to use the container class, right? And inside container, when you try to have, let's say, some multiple graphs, right, or multiple aspects, then you try to use some class called row. And there is something called column. This is like extra small when you want to support the extra small devices, so you can say extra small. And yeah, and this is like when you try to support multiple type of devices. So if I try to minimize, you can see this when I hover over this, and if I minimize, right, so this row and container, right, you can see it dynamically changes. So your now container is a small one. So when I scale this browser a bit more, you can see the container width is changing, right? So that's the usage of using Bootstrap. So your graphs will be scalable on multiple devices, and as well as for different browsers. So it will take care of support, not in terms of just for dimensions of the device, but also in terms of supporting some default CSS as well. So you don't need to write your own custom CSS. You will be just working on core business logic. So yeah, so whenever we work on example, we will see some few other examples of Bootstrap and working with D3.js. Now in this example, you can see we are using chart.js, and what this chart.js does. So yeah, can anybody tell me? Let's start with Rupali. Okay, Rupali, can you just tell me, by seeing this code, what we are trying to achieve?
Yeah. First, we are creating a variable width and getting the width of chart area by get element ID.
Yeah.
Then we are creating a variable height by dividing the width by 3.236. Then we are selecting the chart area and appending a SVG and creating a variable for it.
Yeah.
And then in the end, we are calling resize function. The control will go into this particular function. Then we'll again call
Yeah.
the chart area. Then we'll again create a height with the help of width, and then we'll select the chart area, and then
Yes. Yeah.
apply it with the height and width which we have passed.
So basically, like so like if I just comment this line, let's say we don't want to. Okay, let's say if I just comment out this file. Okay, now, and let's just console this height. console dot height, or maybe we can do for the both width, and we can say height. Now let's see the output. So you can see the output, right? So whenever, so this is, I'm trying to achieve the responsiveness. So what is responsiveness? If you see here my row or container, you can see like whenever I decrease this, it keeps changing, right? So this is the custom resizing or custom responsiveness we're handling. But if we want to do without the help of, let's say, chart.js, right? So let's say if I remove this line of code and we want to achieve with this, now you can see like I am not using the chart.js. Now even after that, you can see the width is now 970. You can see at the top here, right? And then it increases by, if I just make it global, like maybe the maximum one, it's 1170, right? So this is by handling through the Bootstrap. So that's why the Bootstrap JS we use when we plot the graph. So we don't need to write this method, and this is not very accurate as well, right? So you can understand, like we want to get rid of this much piece of code, and which is also not so accurate. So we want to use Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is a framework which will help you to achieve the responsiveness for your web pages, so you can support multiple devices. So that's the usage of Bootstrap. Okay, let me just comment back. So everybody understood, right? The Bootstrap, why we need Bootstrap.
Yes.
Okay, you can explore, I can share a few links maybe after the session, so you can understand like few basic classes. You don't need to know a lot. So there is a few called container, row, and sometime you want to have a different graph. Let's say you have a, so in a sense, let me give you some basic example. So let's say this is a web page, right? And when you draw a graph, you have one graph here and you have another graph here, right? So how you can do that to make sure like when you scale your web pages, or maybe like another third graph which should be here. So that means it cover 50% of the page, and this will also 50%, and this will cover the 100%, right? So with the help of Bootstrap, by writing the simple classes to your HTML element, you can achieve this without even writing CSS. So that's why the Bootstrap framework comes into picture. So it will help you to write a lot of CSS and even JavaScript. Okay, so another SVG example. So this is also basic one. We can quickly wrap up this. So we are trying to draw a graph with the help of SVG, right? So what we are trying to achieve, we have a data and we have set the default width and height. We select the SVG, we set the width and height default, right? And under that we are creating a bars, and with the bar we are plotting with the help of enter, with the help of data. And then, as why we are using enter, because we don't have those attributes or those HTML elements created inside body, so we use enter, and we append the rect. So rect is a SVG element. Now when you are creating a rect, you need to set the attribute of x and y, like from where it needs to start. Now you can see like we have, so this is, you can see here the function parameters is dynamic. So we use this as a variable. So whenever our y changes, when we plot the next bar with the coordinate value, with this values, we try to change the position as well for the y. And similarly we set the width and height. The height is constant, but the width is varying based on the data. And similarly, so if you see this I is, so can anybody tell me what is this I? Who can tell me this, what is this I? Okay, let's start with Ganesh. I think Ganesh is not on the call. Okay, maybe we can start with Asta. Can you tell me like what is this I variable? Rupali?
No idea.
Okay. Asta, are you there? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So can you think of like what this I variable is?
No.
Okay.
Maybe the second iteration, maybe.
Okay.
But
So,
but
but
where is it getting
Yeah.
assigned?
okay. So see, the purpose of this example for you to, because you will see a lot more function as parameter and it's very complex for you to understand, right? So I will show you like how easy it is to know like this flow. So you understand till this here, right? How we created the rectangles, SVG,
Yes.
right? Now,
Mm-hmm.
then, so every rectangle SVG has an attribute, right? Which is X and Y. This is very simple. Like, like when we plot a rectangle in SVG, we need to pass X and Y, which is the starting position of a coordinate. And then we set the width and height. So let me open this. So if you see, so our coordinate system in Java, sorry, in D3JS is also work from this as a reference, right? So we need a coordinate here, which is this X and down Y, and we need to give the width and height so we can draw a rectangle. So this is the purpose, and this is how we do the SVG. Now you understand like we give the X, which is the position from here, and you can see in our output this is the position we are given a 10 distance from here. Now this is the Y. So how it works, if you see, we are giving this parameters. Now this parameter, when you set the attribute X, right, so we are iterating over a list of rectangle object, right? So this is an array of rectangle object. So each object we are trying to give the X. Similarly here we are passing two arguments. One is D. Now D is stand for the data, right? So which is this one 210. We are passing like all the data, but we are not using that D inside. So what we are using is I value, which is an index value. So this will be like array of indexes. So it will be like 0 1 2 3 4 5 6. You understood now this I?
Yes, but in that function D we have passed. We have not passed the data variable, no?
No, if you see here, right, data is passed here in the bars, and now we are using
Yeah.
bars here,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So the mapping is already there in an object. Now we are passing the external extra parameter called I, which is an index. So this value will be 0. Okay, so maybe if you want to, let's say, so whenever you have issue, right, with the code to understand, you try to split the code into multiple line and see, and then you can just inspect element, and sorry, this is the one, right? Yes. Okay, so we missed this. So you can see indexes, right? 0 1 2 3 4 5 6. So this is an indexes of these array elements. So that's how, like, whenever you have difficulty in understanding code, because most of the D3JS code a single line, it's very hard to read and understand. So try to split the code into multiple lines and then debug, so then you can see what should be the expected behavior. Then similarly we set the width and height, so we are setting the width and height, and then we are trying to set the text in the corner. So in dynamically we are creating an another element called as my text. This is just a holder. Then we pass all the data, we append the text, right? So what is the text should look like? So you can see the values in the last, which is coming from an array. So we set the attribute x and y, and we, yeah, this is the normal one, so you can understand the behavior. So yeah, so this is more primarily your you can also see, like when we setting the attribute y, right, we have set the 30 as default because of this height, right? And then this is I multiplied by 40 because of this logic. So yeah, so this is what it is. So
But in this bars dot attribute code,
mm-hmm.
we are multiplying the index value with 40. So
Yes.
we can choose anything,
Yeah,
or is it
yeah,
like
yeah, you can choose anything. You can choose anything.
okay?
So this is just like you're trying to give the y value of your bar graph, right? You can also push it,
Mhm.
but if you change this, let's see, if you have mentioned, let's say if I give you 50, now you can see the alignment because you change the alignment, right? But you have to handle this alignment here as well. Now it looks fine, right? So try to try to work with those examples and change the code and see the output. So that's how like you will get familiar with the code base, and very easy for you to understand the bigger code bases, because this is the smaller one, but you need to understand the smaller code, and this is a bit complex but not that much, because now you're familiar with JavaScript. You know how function as a parameter you can pass to another method or module. So try to work on these examples. Let me see if I have a more one more. So this is what we have learned entire together. I think this is all the examples. So you have bar graph, you have circle, the hoe, and you have this like hover element. I think we do have this. Yeah, so you can see like there is an issue here, and this is a simple SVGs. So whatever we learn individually, I just try to plot everything on a single file. You can see this example for your own use case. But like takeaway from this session is you need to understood the basic code really well. Understand the DOM manipulation, because this looks very simple, but when you try to understand the API documentation and apply those logics into your code base, you can achieve a lot more. Like a basic example can become really complex if you understand animation, if you understand transition, if you can use uh, like say if I just hover, I want it should be slide down to the right, so I want to use transform method or maybe translate method, right? So just do some basic homework after this session, maybe take time tomorrow, and then we can come up and we'll do some like we'll go through some basic fundamental of graph, like different shape and scale. We'll also cover like chart fundamental, and with that I think by the next session you will be really good in hands-on with the basic core fundamentals. You can understand like each and every code in terms of selection, chaining, and basic shapes and scale. So that's the next session, and then we will then after that the further two session, which will be more on practical example. So we'll take an example of stock market. So we'll see like how you can build some stock analysis graph from scratch, and what else, like maybe then you can have some kind of homework after the session, so you can bring much more interactivity to that graph as well, and we'll add some more functionality to it, and then we will work together and with some other examples from the D3JS documentation. Okay, so that's all for today. Do you have any question?
No.
Okay, so I will upload this video recording, and then we can catch up uh, let's see if tomorrow, if you are pretty good in SVG and other concepts of D3JS fundamental, we can do that tomorrow. Otherwise, we can do day after tomorrow.
I think day after tomorrow should be fine. Like we can go
Yes,
through what
yes.
we have covered till now.
Okay, then we can do the day after tomorrow. Not a problem.
Okay.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Okay.
Let's
Thank
catch up.
you.
Okay, you're welcome. Yeah, bye bye.